Hello, I thought today I'd tell you a little bit about how we moved to Hebden Bridge, which is in West Yorkshire, which is in the northwest of England in the United Kingdom. So, about 8 years ago, my partner and I moved here with our 1-year-old son Griffin. We'd been living in Manchester, which is where John and I had met, and we really loved hill walking, and we'd come out every weekend to different places around Yorkshire, Derbyshire, Lancashire, and Hebden Bridge was one of those places. And there was a really lovely pub, which is still here, called the Fox and Goose. It's a cooperative, and there's a really lovely, welcoming vibe. And we'd always organise a walk and end up at that pub. So we really loved Hebden Bridge. It's quite famous for having lots of writers and lots of creative folk who live here. I think it's also been described as the lesbian capital of the North. Possibly there's a very strong gay community and liberal community as well. So it felt like a place that we very naturally gravitated towards, but we didn't think that we'd be able to afford it. Then, by some complete and absolute miracle, we came across a little terraced house that was small but had a very beautiful window at the top of the house that I fell in love with. And we figured that if we could scrape the money together from our friends and family, and they were incredible in supporting us, we managed to get together a little deposit and bought the house. And it needed so much updating. And in many ways, it hasn't been ideal, but it's been a really beautiful home for us, and we've been able to just do it very slowly. This isn't our home, by the way. That's a very lovely home up on the tops. So anyway, we realised that very quickly the outdoors became a very big part of our life because we don't have a garden. And in some ways for that I'm quite grateful, because it means that every day I make sure that I get out and I get up and I get some daylight. And also our children's school is up at the top of the field, so even though we live down in the town, we have a walk up through the fields and the forest every day, up to school and then again back down to school. And we do it all through the winter as well as in the spring, and it's a really lovely, lovely way of just being in touch with the seasons and seeing them change around you and the different wildlife and what happens to the plants. It's a real education for the kids. So it's been 8 years here, and they've grown up in this town where they feel very safe because there's a very strong community and children are really included in daily life. They're really seen as a big part of it. And in some ways, it really reminded me of my childhood in Barcelona when we first moved here, because there's a lot of street life and a lot of things happened outdoors, and because you pretty much can't leave the house without bumping into somebody that you know in some way or not, which is really lovely. And I was a mum at home on my own while John was at work in Manchester for a long time at the beginning. So I felt really grateful for that community, that knowing that if I walked out the door with Griffin in a pram, we would come across someone, or, there would be somebody to talk to or to play with. And so it's been a really lovely time, and our children have grown older now, and they have their own more independent experiences of the town and the nature around us. And it's a very, very dramatic landscape because it's a valley. It can be quite dark in winter, but then also when the light arrives, it's incredibly magical. And I always say that our home is like a home of two halves. There's when there's the light and when there's not the light. And when we have less light, then it becomes like a little nest or a cave. But then when there is the light, it almost feels Mediterranean. And you can also see that in the landscape, and like how green it is also a product of how much rain there is in the colder seasons, and also summer, to be honest. Um, but I do really love the different pockets of drama in the landscape, and I really understand why so many writers are drawn to this area. There's something about it that is incredibly evocative, and the texture of it, the fact that it is so steep, like to get anywhere, you have to walk up a hill or walk down a hill, knowing that you're going to have to walk up another hill again to get back to where you were before. But it does mean that we all have very strong thighs and rather pert bottoms. Um, so yeah, it's a very special place, and some people do talk about getting valley fever here, and it is true. If you don't leave after a while. It can be quite intense, and I have to remind myself to, otherwise I do just kind of end up entrenched in my little life in this little town, in this little valley in Yorkshire. I'm not from Yorkshire. I was born in London, and then I grew up for most of my life between France and Scotland and Spain and London for a couple of years. But I feel very at home here, really, really at home. And there's something about the landscape that really moves me. And whenever I come back, I actually gasp. But there's a drive into the valley along the road, and I am moved every single time. My heart skips a beat because it is just so beautiful. Um, so yeah, it's a very special place, and I would highly recommend, if you ever have any chance to come here. There are so many different little pockets of spaces, and it truly is quite magical. And yesterday we were walking through the woods, and my eldest just turned to me and said, "Mama, I'm so happy we live in the countryside." And whenever I'm worrying that their lives are a bit boring, I think I will try and remind myself of that, that at least they have this gift of this incredibly bucolic, wonderful nature around them. So do come to Hebden Bridge if you're ever this way.